and welcome to this week's edition of SouthCoast End Zone, the first playoff edition.
I'm excited. Are you excited?
It sounds weird, doesn't it, to say playoffs?
Playoffs?
And it's not even
Playoffs?
Halloween. I know, we need like add in the Jim Morris sound effect.
Yeah.
That's what we need. But really, playoffs. But anyway, I'm Tim Weisberg.
I'm Laurie Lost.
And we really are just thrown by this completely.
My head is spinning. I can't, I'm trying to rack my head around all the different divisions, the seeds, the playoff teams, the non-playoff teams. It's been a whirlwind the last couple of days. So
part of it is our own fault though, because we had a couple of months there where we could have figured it all out, but we kept trying and we couldn't. Really, we couldn't piece it all together.
There's a lot of math to it.
Right.
And as journalists,
that's why we're in this business.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, I guess it's going to be weird this year. And then now this is only on a trial basis, right? This isn't going to be forever.
I think it's a 2-year.
Yeah.
And then they'll see if there's any kind of things that need to be worked out. But as Buddy said to me yesterday, he said, do not refer to the first portion of the season, the first 8 weeks, as the end of the regular season, because technically the regular season doesn't end until Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no, Thanksgiving doesn't count anymore. You can't separate them and still count it.
So it's kind of, there's still a lot of craziness, and talking to some of the coaches and athletic directors, everyone's kind of just, let's see how it goes.
I got a better plan of how to work this all out. We'll just move Thanksgiving till the end of October.
We'll
do it the day before Halloween.
I think some people may not
like
that
idea.
They might have a problem with that, yeah.
Then I would have more time to shop before Christmas, between Black Friday and Christmas.
But on the upside, we have 9 teams in the area that we cover, and 6 out of those 9 teams are in the playoffs.
Congratulations
Woo!
to those teams and players and schools.
That's awesome. On the downside, only one of those teams, Old Rochester, has a home game, so everybody else is hitting the road. And
they are hitting the road. They're going all over the place.
Yeah, all from Attleboro all the way to Silver Lake up to Westwood. We're going to be tracking our GPSs trying to find some of these games.
Hiring stringers?
I don't know about hiring any stringers. Maybe pleading with the coaches to call us in and give us the results.
From Westwood? Jeez.
Yeah, some of these games are far away, but it's exciting, I know, for a lot of the teams to make the playoffs, because if anyone saw our paper earlier this week, we didn't have any teams that made the playoffs last year under the old format, and then the previous year to that, New Bedford made it. So more teams are getting in. They're hitting the road. They're gonna have to travel for some of these games. So we'll see how the first week goes.
Maybe by next week I'll actually shake this cuff. We'll see what happens.
That would be nice.
All right, why don't you get us started off with first and goal?
Okay, first and goal. On first down, Cam Costa powered Apponequet's offense with his best passing performance of the season, completing 6 passes for 113 yards and 3 touchdowns. Second down, Nolan Bergeron recorded 3 passing touchdowns in a game for the first time in his career as the Bulldogs stayed undefeated with a win over Seekonk. Third down, Nick Richard had a hand in 4 touchdowns, passing for 2 and rushing for 2 others as Voc Tech beat Bourne to secure the SEC B tier title. And fourth down, Cole Bernier not only had 167 rushing yards, he scored 2 touchdowns, including the game winner on the final play as Old Colony beat Holbrook Avon. And the players of the week, Chandler DeBras and Kevin Nunes, and New Bedford High's defense. I'm just giving it to all of them. Chandler DeBras connected with Kevin Nunes on 2 scoring strikes, and New Bedford's defense held Brockton on a game-tying 2-point conversion attempt as the Whalers upset the Boxers 21-19 for New Bedford's second win over Brockton in the last decade. So all those guys got into the end zone, and those are our players of the week.
I knew we were opening up Pandora's box last week when we gave player of the week to the entire defense.
You can't do it one week and not do it the next week when New Bedford beats Brockton.
When you deserve it. Nothing else.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump right into these games because I don't know anything about a lot of these teams, so we have to find out. Laurie's been diligently researching, so we'll jump right.
Hopefully I can keep it all straight, so.
We'll see. We'll start right off with the Friday night playoff games. All the playoff games are on Friday night. In Division I South, the quarterfinal matchup is between New Bedford. They are at Attleboro, 7 p.m. And Attleboro, at least from what I know, they're one of the better teams around.
Yep. Well, I was lucky enough to see Attleboro earlier this season against Dartmouth. I traveled up to Attleboro, and they have a stud at quarterback, Tim Walsh. This kid is unbelievable. In 7 games this season, he has thrown 21 touchdown passes. including a 6-touchdown pass performance against Mansfield.
Yeah.
So they don't really hide what they do. I mean, they go to the air with this kid, and he's as I think I said back in week 3 after watching him, week 2, I mean, this kid is probably the best high school quarterback I've seen, in my, 10, 12, maybe 15 years of covering high school football. I don't want to age myself too much here.
She's only been out of high school for 3 years. Too.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's going to be a tough challenge for New Bedford going to Attleboro, especially since it's, it's on the road. But, the Whalers, they 2 weeks ago, they beat Dartmouth. Exciting win. This past week, I think they, shocked everyone when they beat Brockton, who, I think everyone pretty much said, oh, well, Brockton's, got the big 3, no big deal. But New Bedford's offense came, really stood its ground. They rallied. They were down 13-0, and they came back. Hector Diaz had a rushing touchdown, and then Kevin Nunes and DeBras, they hooked up twice for touchdowns. And then, Brockton came back, scored a touchdown late, and then they went for the 2-point conversion to tie it, and New Bedford's defense stood its ground, and they stopped them. So this is the best way New Bedford could go into the playoffs is riding, a huge win over Dartmouth and a even bigger win over Brockton. So, I mean, I think New Bedford's really going to need kind of a balanced attack. I know we saw it a few weeks ago against Dartmouth. They need to be able to get some yards on the ground, and they need to be able to keep Tim Walsh and Attleboro's offense off the field if they're going to get a win. So.
All right, so that is New Bedford at Attleboro. Our next game, Division 5 South, Seekonk at Old Rochester, 7 p.m. All these Friday night games are at 7 p.m.
Yep.
And lucky draw for the Bulldogs there.
Well, they've kind of breezed through the season. They're 7-0. They finished 6-0 in the SouthCoast Conference. They've set up that Thanksgiving Day SEC title game with Apponequet. So that's on the kind of the back burner now. And they draw a Seekonk team that they just beat last week. It was 31-14. I was at that game. It was freezing. There was no hot chocolate at halftime. They ran out. They're going to
just start bringing you a hot chocolate in the second quarter.
Bill Tilden, the athletic director, before the game, promised me there was going to be tons of hot chocolate. They ran out. It was horrible. I was so cold. I was like shaking like this. Anyway, in the game, it was a close game the first half. It was kind of back and forth. Seekonk did a really good job, stopping Richie Phillips. He finished with 31 yards on 8 carries. And according to Henry Quinlan after the game, Seekonk defense was saying, Richie right, Richie left, Richie right, Richie left. With them focusing in on Richie so much, Darian Dumont, he ended up having 85 rushing yards. He had a rushing touchdown. He caught a touchdown pass from Nolan Bergeron, who had 3 in the game. First time in his career, he's ever thrown 3 touchdowns in a game. And really, the defense in the second half for Old Rochester is what was the difference. They had 3 of their 4 interceptions of Seaconk's quarterback, let's see what his name, Nick Lancelletti, in that second half. So, they kept getting the ball back, and any type of comeback for Seekonk was stopped by the defense. So it was a pretty exciting game. In the game though, Old Rochester had 2 touchdowns called back on penalties, and Seekonk had 1. So it was one of the closer games I think that they've had this year. Besides maybe the Dayton-Rehoboth game, but still, Old Rochester, when it was all said and done, Old Rochester had the game in hand, and I just don't know how much Henry Quinlan is excited to see a team that they just saw last week, as opposed to seeing a newer, team that they haven't seen, or, maybe some of they saw early in the season.
Yeah.
So. But I'm wondering what things differently Seekonk might try and do this week as opposed to last week. But that kid, Nick Lancelletti, he completed 12 of 29 passes for 179 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns, but he did have the interception. So
I think it's probably going to be more about what Seekonk did to stop Richie Phillips and how Old Rochester is going to find a way to keep them from being able to do that again. And even it doesn't really matter if you shut down one aspect of the Bulldog offense.
Well, that Old Rochester, Apponequet, those 2 teams, they have so many different weapons that if you take one away, somebody else is going to step up. And in this, in the game last week, I know we've kind of talked about him all season. Hayden Bergeron, he's one of the area's top kickers. He had a field goal right before the half to give them a 17-14 lead at the half, and he caught a touchdown pass from his brother Nolan. He's kind of one of those unsung heroes. He could have a big game this week coming up. So they have a lot of different weapons that they can go to. So.
All right, that is Seekonk at Old Rochester. The next game, Greater New Bedford Voc-Tech at Abington. The first ever appearance in the playoffs for the Bears, and they get the mighty Green Wave.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough challenge for Voc-Tech, but Voc-Tech's coming in off a huge win over Bourne. I think it was their first win in Bourne, and I don't know, it was like, I think 15 or 20. I mean, see, forever, more than a decade. And in that game, like I said earlier, Nick Richard, he had a great performance. He had 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, and he really just, controlled, he's the quarterback. He's the one that's supposed to lead the team. He did that, Dimitri Woodbury, he had 75 rushing yards. Sean Aldridge had 69, and Tim Levy had 58. So they had the rushing attack. I think they had over 200 yards rushing, but with Nick Richards throwing for 100 yards, over 100 yards, and a couple touchdowns, that really opens things up for a Voc-Tech team that is pretty much, run-minded team. They focus on the run, and they'll need that kind of balance against an Abington team that's riding a 6-game winning streak into the playoffs. Their lone loss of the season came in Week 1 to Duxbury, which.
Yeah.
I mean, do I have to say any more? Duxbury? They lost 20-13.
For those who don't know, really good team.
Yeah, slaying those dragons in Duxbury, right?
They pretty much beat everybody. So.
Yeah, and Abington has scored 25 or more points 5 times this season, while limiting the opposition to 14 or less points 4 times. So they got an offense that can put points on the board, and they've got a defense that can stop opposing teams. So I think the key for Voc-Tech this week is let's get that rushing attack going. Let's pick up some first downs. And let's try and do a little bit of like what New Bedford's going to try and do. Keep the opposing team's offense off the field. And that's the best way, to lead to victory. And also, playoff times, a lot of crazy things happen. Turnovers, penalty, those kind of things that maybe you don't always think of that go into a game plan. Those things are going to be key this week for all the games.
And for Voc-Tech fans heading out to that game, little heads up. Don't go to the high school.
Yep, it's at the middle school.
Yes, that's where the football field is. I learned that lesson when I parked at the high school and I had to walk like 3 miles to the middle school.
Oh my God.
Then I got there and I didn't have my press pass and they wouldn't let me in.
Well, what I did want to say too is this is Voc-Tech's first ever appearance in the state playoffs. They've made it to the vocational playoffs the last few years, but even though it's under the new format, we looked it up and it's the first time ever. So congratulations to the Voc-Tech Bears. So.
All right, our next game is Division III Southeast, and that'll be Dartmouth at Silver Lake. And good luck to whoever's going up to Silver Lake because that's a whole lot of back roads.
That'll be Bill.
Nice.
Yeah. Poor Bill.
Well, that's close for Bill.
Yeah, it's not too far.
Oh, thank God it wasn't me.
Thank God it wasn't you.
Because I'm the closest otherwise. But Silver Lake is always a strong team, and Dartmouth's kind of been hit or miss the last few weeks here.
Yeah, well, Silver Lake, they've gotten the job done most of the season from the quarterback, Dan Finn. He has 8 passing touchdowns on the season, but they've also had a strong performance recently from Jeff Reynolds. He has 5 rushing touchdowns, including 3 in last week's win, or actually it wasn't last week. The last time they played, they were off last week, a win over Whitman-Hanson 2 weeks ago. So I think they're trying to come on a little bit more balanced the last few weeks of the season, where it looked like it was mostly just a passing attack early on with Finn. But like you said, Dartmouth is kind of, hit or miss. They've had some big wins.
Should we say they've been trick or treat?
Maybe trick or treat. It is Halloween week, but I think the big thing for Dartmouth is the injuries. They're starting to pile up. I know at the game I was at 2 weeks ago against New Bedford, Connor Tavares, he was injured. He had, I think it was his, I can't remember what it was, his thigh or his some kind of leg injury, hamstring maybe. And I know he was limited this past week. He only had 24 rushing yards. Jack McCabe, somebody who probably wouldn't have played a lot, if Connor wasn't injured and if Martin wasn't out because he's still been out with a high ankle sprain. But he had 30. He led the rushing attack with 35 yards, against Barnstable, and really Dartmouth just struggled. Last week. Barnstable came out and scored on 5 first half possessions. To take a huge lead. Dartmouth managed just 154 total yards of offense, or actually rushing yards in the game. And Blaine Almeida, he had the lone Dartmouth touchdown. It came off of a turnover by Barnstable. He scored on a 1-yard run. But really, Dartmouth needs to get going. They need to get some of these guys healthy, and they've shown, I've seen them enough this season, as the Dartmouth beat writer over here, that that they have the athletes. They just need to get healthy, and they just need to kind of put it all together and have. I think at this point in the season, they need a little bit of balance. They need a quarterback that can throw the ball, and they need a couple running backs that can open up the field a little bit. So I mean, it will be a tough game going to Silver Lake, but I think this is the game that Dartmouth could win. If they are healthy and they don't have that many turnovers. So.
All right, it is Dartmouth at Silver Lake. Now moving into Division 4 South, Apponequet at Norton, 7 p.m. And that's not a big hike for those who live in Laker country.
No,
Norton,
it's
so.
actually. I mean, that's probably one of the
About
closer.
20 minutes.
Yeah, it's just on the other side of Taunton. I mean, I used to work at the Taunton Gazette, so I've been to Norton many times,
Mm-hmm.
and the only reason why I didn't want to go to the game at Norton this time is I know the press box is it's really tiny, and it's, if anyone's ever been in the Fairhaven press box, which I like to talk about, which is
you have to scale the mountain.
straight, it's straight up like this, it's kind of angled a little bit straight up. The one in Norton is literally I think it's actually going backwards, it's
Nice. And it's a ladder, not a stairs.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's a real.
That shouldn't even be legal anymore.
Yeah, unless they changed it. I mean, it's been a few years since I've been there, but that Apponequet fans, Apponequet players, that's why I won't be at the game. I really wanted to go to your game, but it's going to be cold.
God forbid she watched the game from somewhere other than the press box.
I have to be in the press box. It was Old Rochester last week. That I think it took a couple years off my life being out there.
That's because you can't see over the freshmen, though.
It was I can't walk the field.
I feel the same way.
I can't see.
I can't see over the players.
And I don't want to get in front of the players because I don't want to get knocked down and break a leg.
I just sit on the bench.
Well, hey, that's a good idea too.
Till the officials catch me.
So anyway, I mean, this should be a game that Apponequet, is going to be in, should be able to win. Norton only has one loss this season. It came to Medway earlier this year.
I think you have to say it like Ralph Cram did. You have to say Norton.
Norton. The Lancers have won 3 straight and outscored their opposition.
Lancers?
Yeah, the Lancers.
Really? Lancers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless I'm remembering wrong, I'm pretty sure it's the Lancers.
No, I'm just saying that's a weak name. I'm not saying that you're wrong.
No, I think I'm right. Yeah,
I'm
don't
just
say
saying
it's weak. That's not very nice.
Lancers.
Anyway, they've outscored the competition.
Lakers versus Lancers.
It is pretty cool.
I'm trying to hype up the game here for people.
157 to 129. So it's been pretty close in a lot of their contests this year. And 2 of their 5 victories have come by 2 points or less. So, there's games that have been really close that they've come out on top of. At the opposite side, Apponequet's come out on top of a lot of lopsided games where they've dominated.
And that's the question that I have for you is, have those starters rested too much?
I don't think so. I mean, they've had a couple games where they played longer than just the first half, and it should be definitely a real good measuring stick of how the SouthCoast Conference and the Tri-Valley League kind of stack up to each other. Because Norton is from the Tri-Valley League and Apponequet is in the SouthCoast Conference. But Matt Hines leads Norton this year with 10 touchdowns, while Brad Rye has 7. And Apponequet, I mean, I don't know if we have time to go down the list of all their top kids.
Right.
But Matt Michael, he had 2 touchdowns last week in the huge win over Wareham, lopsided win. He has a season total of 12. And he leads the Lakers this year. Weston Cohen had 1 touchdown last week. He's got 11 for the season. Like I said earlier, Cam Costa had maybe the best passing performance of his whole career. He completed 6 of 8 passes, 113 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
Nice.
So he got the job done. And the Lakers, they scored on their first 6 possessions, which I feel like just the week before that we were saying, they scored, I think, on every possession or whatever it was. So
And don't forget Troy Nanfeld too.
Yeah, Troy Nanfeld, he had a couple touchdowns. I think he had a touchdown, and he kicks extra points and everything. So I mean, they have so many different weapons. It's going to be interesting to see. Is Norton's defense good enough to stop the Lakers, or this should be a game that kind of.
We've seen the Lakers put up 45, 51, ridiculous numbers with their starters only playing half the game.
Yeah.
So imagine what'll happen if they're in there for the whole game.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I think Apponequet should be able to win this game. I think really Apponequet should have had a home game, because, of how strong they have been this season and how they've won so big. But it's a 6-3 matchup. They have to go to the road. It's not too far of a drive, so Apponequet fans, make that trip up there, support your Lakers, and hopefully you'll get a win. And we'll be talking about Apponequet next week in the playoffs.
And our last playoff game, and again, all these playoff games are Friday night at 7. Our last playoff game is Bishop Stang at Westwood. and the Spartans made the playoffs, but
that's
they didn't exactly come storming into.
Well, it's hard. I think a lot of us forget. Just last year they had one win. This year they're 4-3. They're 2-2 in the EAC. They finished second in the EAC. They qualified for the playoffs under the new format. I mean, they got to be excited over it.
As they should be.
And I know it must hurt coming off the loss to Somerset Berkeley. Where Somerset Berkeley clinched the EAC. That had to hurt. But at the same time, there's a lot of upside for Bishop Stang making the tournament, making the playoffs. There's a lot of excitement.
You got a lot of young guys on the roster,
yeah,
too.
there are a lot of young guys out there. And they have a tough draw. They just made it in the tournament. Now they're going to have to go to number 1 Westwood, which
is a hike.
Is a hike and a half. It's definitely far away. And
since it has West in the name, so it can't be close to it.
Yeah, it's not like it's SouthCoast Wood or something. It's not anywhere near here. You like that?
SouthCoast Wood. I think we should lobby to change the name of one of the local towns to that.
That would be pretty cool. But Westwood takes a 5-game winning streak into the playoffs. The lone loss came week 2 to King Philip, which we always King Philip's one of those teams. They lost 7-0 to King Philip. And Westwood is averaging 31 points per game this season, while giving up an average of just over 14 points per game.
Yeah, that's tough.
So, strong offense, kind of a stingy defense. And really, Bishop Stang last week, the Spartans couldn't get going because they didn't have the ball. Somerset Berkeley ate up that whole first quarter with a big drive. I think they were down 19-0 at halftime.
Yeah, they scored a whole bunch in the second quarter.
Yeah, and Stang didn't have a first down in the whole first half. I think they ran only 10 offensive plays. The offense did get going in the second half. Jared Zaninski, he scored from 6 yards out. That was a lone touchdown. But Somerset Berkeley did a really good job at stopping quarterback Matt Golden. He had just 10 yards on 11 carries, and the last few weeks leading up to this game, he was kind of the focal point of the offense, the one that was able to move the ball. So I think that the key is for Stang to be able to, move the chains. Let's get that offense going, that grinding offense. I know that I saw them earlier this year, and they can grind it out. They can eat the time off the clock. They just have to keep picking up first downs. And like earlier last week against Somerset Berkeley, they only had 66 yards of total offense. That's not going to cut it, when you go to Westwood. So they're going to need a little bit more on offense next week or this week.
Well, that covers our playoff teams. Now we have 3 teams that did not qualify for the playoffs, but they're still playing. They'll play in what's called the non-playoff bracket, right?
Yes.
And so we'll start off with the 2 Friday night games that we have, both at 7 p.m. We'll breeze through these because our time's running short. We are Wareham at Medway.
Yep.
Not Midway. Medway. Wareham at Medway.
Yep. Well, Wareham, is 1-6 on the season. They've had a couple tough games the last few weeks. Lost to Old Rochester 2 weeks ago, Ponequet last week. Both of those games they avoided the shutout. I know. It was kind of they were down.
The third stringers.
Yeah. They were down late. But last week, Stephen Florando scored on a 56-yard touchdown run, and Nate Moore also scored the other touchdown last week for Wareham. He leads the Vikings.
So he must be the team
leader.
Yeah,
he leads the Vikings this year with 4 touchdowns. So he's younger, so it's going to be good for the future. But the Vikings have been outscored 255-84 this year.
Wow.
So it's been a long season for Wareham, and the Vikings, they've also given up 45 points or more on 4 different occasions this year. So it's been a little tough. And Medway is kind of an interesting team for Wareham to play, because they didn't make the playoffs, but they have a 4-3 record. Mm-hmm. They had a 4-game winning streak, midway through the season, but they've lost 2 straight, including a shutout to last week. To Westwood, which we were talking about earlier, and Anthony Parlowski, he scored 8 of Medway's 19 touchdowns this season, and they're averaging 21.2 points per game. So they're a team that can put some points on the board, but at the same time, maybe Wareham, if they can kind of score early and establish themselves early, maybe they can turn it around, and you get to see kind of how they stack up against a team outside of their right. Out of their conference.
And it's good because as they're taking their lumps against 3 good teams in a row. So if there has to be an upside to losing, it's that you learn to win from that. So.
Yep.
All right, our next game is Fairhaven at Archbishop Williams. And Fairhaven, they had a chance to knock off Dayton Rehoboth there and to have what would have been a 4-game winning streak.
Yep.
But instead, having a 3-game winning streak and to have it be snapped by DR, that's nothing to sneeze at.
No, I mean, I think, the way Fairhaven opened the season, I think it was 3 straight losses, and it looked pretty hopeless there. And then all of a sudden, they start getting a couple wins, and then it's a 3-game winning streak, and then they're going to Dayton Rehoboth. Let's upset the Falcons, and then they fell behind her early in that game. I think it was 27-0, and I think the Falcons scored on four times within a 6-minute span in that first quarter, and it was like the floodgates. You just couldn't stop it. And when you're down that much that early on the road, sometimes it's hard to come back from. And it's nothing Fairhaven, but Dayton Rehoboth, I'm sure, wanted to make the playoffs, and that was because they weren't, they had to, with the power rankings, they had to win, to be able to get in. But quarterback Cam Charette, he had another touchdown pass to his season total. I think he's got 2 now. He hit Kevin Albino from 17 yards out. And Cross Nagalia, once again, he led Fairhaven's running attack with 78 yards on 9 carries. So there's some positives that came out of that game, but I think they kind of need to look back on, what got them that 3-game winning streak. And supposedly, as the MIA said, this is supposed to be against similar level opponents. I don't know if that's true, because Archbishop Williams, the most I know about Archbishop Williams, I think, is with girls basketball. It seems like Fairhaven or somebody's always usually playing them in the playoffs. But this season, Archbishop Williams has been outscored 194-141. So they're a team that struggled a little bit. They're 2-5 overall, 1-4 in the Catholic Central League. So, like I said earlier, we're going to see how these different leagues and conferences kind of stack up with each other. But they've been led by Kylan Filbert Richardson. He has 9 touchdowns this season.
It's a lot to put on the back of a jersey.
They probably don't put it on the back of the jersey. Or if they did, it would be really tight, the font, or maybe 2 levels. I don't know.
Maybe just KPR on the back.
It might be. Their wins this season have come against Somerset Berkeley, which we know Somerset Berkeley pretty well, and Arlington Catholic. So, how does that stack up with, the teams that Fairhaven's been playing? So I guess we'll see Friday night.
Absolutely. And our final non-playoff game is Saturday at 2:30. Carver at Old Colony, and I'm sure this will be a fun game for both teams because that's a pretty close. Rochester and Carver right next to each other, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of fans heading into that game at Old Colony.
Yeah, and it should be a pretty exciting game. I know, the Cougars had a 3-game losing streak stopped last week in dramatic fashion. As I said earlier, Cole Bernier had that touchdown catch late in the game, and I think he carried a couple defenders on his back to get into the end zone.
3 defenders, yeah.
Yeah, so it was real exciting, and I think, what I didn't mention earlier is Jack Pringle. He just keeps adding to his touchdown passing record, school record. He's got now 15 for the season. He threw 2 last week. He also had a rushing touchdown. He completed 16 passes, 242 yards.
Is Jake Pringle the leading?
He probably is.
I would.
He's had a couple 200 passing yard games before. So he got everything going. Bernier, I think, has proven all year that he's the top receiver on the team. I think Old Colony just needs to establish kind of that rushing attack. Because they haven't really. Doesn't seem like they really have that week in and week out, and that's kind of what has hurt them in those games that they lost. But it was Old Colony's first October win in 6 years.
Wow.
And it was just the first two win in the conference season that they've had in more than a decade. So there's a lot of excitement going on at Old Colony. They face a Carver team that's kind of been up and down. They're 3-4 overall, 2-3 in the Mayflower. Actually 2-4 overall. But they've won 2 of their last 3 games, so they're kind of heating up a little bit at the end of the season. They're averaging just under 20 points per game, and their 2 wins came over Monomoy and Hull. That's Old Colony's 2 other opponents that the MIA is scheduled in the next few weeks. So maybe we'll see how how Old Colony does against Carver, and that could be a measuring stick for those other 2 games.
And one thing about Crusaders teams is they're always physical.
Yeah, and they like to run the ball. This team likes to run the ball. They can also do a little bit of damage through the air. Quarterback Ryan Feely, he threw a touchdown pass and ran for another TD in a win over Hull. So, I think. I don't think Old Colony's ever really played Carver in football. At least that's what Matt Trahan said. But we'll see how they match up. And, depending on how well they do, or it's a measuring stick, that will maybe determine how they'll do in the other 2 games, against kind of similar opponents. So.
All right, we'll give you a quick rundown one more time. The playoff games are all happening Friday night. Division 1 South, New Bedford at Attleboro, they're all 7 p.m. Division 5 South, Seaconcord Old Rochester, and Greater New Bedford Vogue Tech at Abington. Division 3 Southeast, Dartmouth at Silver Lake. And Division 4 South, Apponequet at Norton, and Bishop Stang at Westwood. Non-playoff games Friday, Wareham at Medway, and Fairhaven at Archbishop Williams. Those are both at 7 o'clock as well. And then the non-playoff game on Saturday, Carver at Old Colony at 2:30 p.m. So everybody that's heading out to all these games, we want to make sure that you tweet us at SC_varsity,
Yep.
Vine us at SouthCoast Varsity,
Mm-hmm.
check us out on Facebook, SouthCoastVarsity.com on Facebook, and any Instagram yet?
No Instagram.
Okay. Well, whatever you can do to get pictures, video,
Yep.
observations, any thoughts on the game as they're happening.
Especially if you're going to some of these games that are further away, the
keep
game,
us up to date.
Yeah, the game at Westwood, the game at Abington, even Medway, Archbishop Williams. Some of these games, we might not have a reporter at, and we might be depending on you to help us along and help us track the games, and we'll be at all the other most of the other games. I know I'll be probably at the Attleboro New Bedford game, so if you want to keep up with that, if you don't want to make the drive out to Attleboro, which is a little bit of a hike, you can follow along on Twitter, and I'll keep you up to date.
And if
with that
you
game.
send us information, we will reward you with a retweet.
Yes.
So
Maybe we'll get some more followers.
here you go. We can help you out. That's a big change from when we used to count like how many followers we had. Now we're Twitter royalty.
Yes.
So, all right, that does it for this week's show. So until next week when we're talking about round 2 of the playoffs, we'll see you under the lights.
And in the end zone.